Hello, sir. Good evening.
Hello, hello. Hi. Good to see
Hi.
you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your precious time for the group.
Sure, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
So,
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
we are going to do the recording also of this session. Would that be fine?
Yeah, it should be fine. I'll try to answer as much as I can.
Okay. Thank you. So I think we have a lot of people already,
Hmm.
so we can start the meeting. I feel uh, okay. So hello everyone. So welcome to our ALS Care and Support India session for today. And today we are focusing on neurology queries and concerns related with ALS disease. And today we are honored to have Dr. Vineet Joyson, who is uh, one of the very few doctors in India who is working on MND disease majorly. And he is an associate professor of neurology at CMC Ludhiana, Punjab. And soon his recent study on ALS is going to be incorporated as a study lecture for postgraduate neurological study. So that's a great to know. And welcome you, sir. And thank you so much on behalf of the complete group for sharing your precious time for this noble cause without anything. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Over to
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome. Yeah, so I'm very excited to be here and very fortunate also to have such a wonderful group of people who are already, engaged with this terrible disease in some way or the other. And I'm sure you guys are more up to date with things and looking at the latest research that's happening. I'm just hoping I'll be able to give some direction to the reading and what's happening, help you to understand how to make the most of the literature that's available online. And whatever from my clinical experience, I can help you guide you. It is a difficult disease, it's a very challenging disease, but we are all hopeful that a cure and a treatment should come soon. But that still remains to be seen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So
do you want me to begin with the questions, or how do you want me to?
uh, I think we can begin with the question, or you want to say something as a general thing which you want to share with the group with respect to your ALS experience with the patients you are dealing with?
Yeah, okay. Regarding my experience with patients with ALS, it's been very challenging because there is no treatment, and I really struggle to break the news to the family. That's why I would really like your feedback. That is something we can even do as a proper research. As to what did you feel when the doctor broke the news to you? Whether you felt it was done in a proper way or it was done very not well. It could have been done better. So that's one area that I find very challenging. Because I have no good news to give. So how do you break it in a way that you tell the truth, you tell it, but you say it in an sympathetic and an empathetic way. That is one thing I have found very challenging. The other thing is also, many patients they drop out from regular follow up because it's a hopeless condition. At least we feel hopeless and helpless to great extent, and regular follow up doesn't happen for the doctor to be able to objectively measure, and bring in interventions where we know they will be beneficial. For example, the use of non-invasive ventilation. We know everybody takes Riluzole, everybody, at least in my clinic, they take Edaravone, and they don't come to the hospital to get it. They take it at home. India has very interesting healthcare related behaviors. So they take it at home, which is fine. But then, intervention with non-invasive ventilation, encouraging them to use it early, um, those have been challenges, when we discuss that. And I'm very impressed with the ventilator use, invasive ventilator use, and how you've been able to take care of patients on ventilator. Most of the literature that comes on care for ALS comes from Western countries, and that also from countries where the government would fund ALS care. So they strongly discourage the use of invasive ventilation. But in India, where the caregiver is the one who is paying through his pocket, and also it is not very expensive, I think the decision remains a very individual decision, on what they would like to see happen. So that is a very interesting phenomenon, I think, in India, based on my discussion with you, Satinder. You know, in the Western countries, like I said, where government is sponsoring care, they do discourage patients from going into invasive ventilation. But ALS is a disease where intellectually we seem to be well preserved, and it is only an external motor disease which is progressively worsening. So we have the technology, we have the capacity to have a meaningful relationship with our loved ones, though they may be on ventilation. I think that really changes the perspective, but it is an individual decision for each family. So yeah, these are some of the things that I would like to just share from what I have experienced in my clinic. So is there anybody want to?
I think you raised a very two important point in your discussion right now. The one which you said, that how to deal with just sharing this news with patients. I have seen in many members of this group where because the doctor has not shared it very in a right way, the morale of the patient itself gone down, and that leads to a more progressive nature, or the whole thing would become negative. Means disease itself is very negative, but having the same from doctor's mouth, it's very difficult once to digest. And I think you being concerned about that really I feel it's very, very grateful for you. I'm sure the whosoever is coming to you, you are making sure that that kind of thing would not be disclosed in that ways. And secondly, also this the amount expenditure which government in other countries is doing, and India is very much lacking. I think they are even not heard about ALS. They have not included ALS in rare disease yet, despite it is just formed. So hoping that we all can work together and have something for the ALS patients in India also, like it's happening for other countries. So
yeah,
we can start with the questions. I think Priyanka is here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Priyanka, could you please ask your first question? I think the first couple of questions are from your side.
Yeah. So good evening to all. And Dr. Vineet, my mother is a patient. She's 69 years old. So her diagnosis was Parkinson plus (CBGD (ALS). So she has bulbar symptoms and very too much difficulty in chewing, swallowing, and speech loss is complete. No words are coming out. And one hand is it's like she cannot use it, but rest of the body is functional to some extent. Now it is almost 18 months, 1.5 years, or little more than that, 24 months, and she's having difficulty in swallowing. And as you discussed earlier, it was told that it's like terminal, end of life, or there's nothing more to see. But now I'm coming to this question, that if a person does not eat well for 2 years, right, then it is very obvious that how long a person can live.
Yes.
So this pushed me to search for some medicines, and I found Neodexta maybe a choice, or I don't know. So my question is do we have an alternative of Neodexta in India? Do you think it's a viable option to try, if somebody wants to try? What is your opinion on it? This is on the swallowing and the bulbar part. If it is other question is that is there anything like speech prosthetics? Because whatever I read, I felt like maybe the muscles are very weak, and speech is not coming out. Maybe it's not striking the chords. Very limited knowledge, I don't know about it. So is there any speech prosthetic that we can apply, that at least it can be, some words can come out.
Okay. So coming to your first question, that is regarding Nuedexta. So basically Nuedexta is a combination of two drugs. Okay, so there is a drug called dextromethorphan, and you also have a drug called quinidine. Okay, so dextromethorphan is a drug which, in many cough syrup also you might find it. So it's not a very unique drug which is not available in India as such. And quinidine is one of the, anti-arrhythmogenic drugs that we use in cardiology. And also, it's like a quinine. You've heard of quinine? Quinine they use in malaria. So it's quinine is very similar to quinidine. And it's a combination of this at 20 plus 10 that they are using for patients with pseudobulbar palsy. Okay, and that's important that you understand what is bulbar palsy and what is pseudobulbar palsy. So bulbar palsy, the bulb, or I wish I could draw some diagrams and show you what I mean. But basically, the brain is there. There are two hemispheres, and then the brain, all the neurons or the axons of the neurons come down through the brain stem. Did you understand this much?
Yeah.
Okay, so the brainstem has got three parts. It has got the midbrain, it has got pons, and it has the medulla. Okay, so the bulb is basically the pons and the medulla, that part. So when there is weakness because of the anterior horn cells in the bulb or in the pons, also you develop weakness. That's called bulbar palsy. Okay, because of weakness of the nerves coming out of the bulb or the pons or the medulla and the pons. But this drug is not beneficial in that case. But those nerves which are coming out from the bulb are also controlled from the nerves coming from the hemispheres. The anterior horn cell, or not the anterior horn cell, corticospinal tracts coming from the cortex down to the cranial nerve nuclei, supplying the 10th cranial nerve, the 9th and the 10th cranial nerve. So if there is any lesion affecting that, for example, in patients with ALS, there is a disease that affects that. In those patients, you get a pseudobulbar palsy, which means it is not, they have weakness of swallowing. They also have the same difficulty with speech, but it is not because of the bulb. It is because of a lesion above. So it's pseudobulbar. In these patients, what happens is they have a lot of emotional lability. Okay, so when you'll speak to them, suddenly they'll have this fake laughter. They have uncontrolled emotions, very short lasting. And that part, or the pseudo affect, which we call them, that is benefited by giving dextromethorphan and quinidine. So not so much the swallowing, not so much the speech part, but the pseudo affect part or the pseudo bulbar part is benefited with Nuedexta. Now, other drugs that you can use for this, you have tricyclic antidepressants like amitriptyline, nortriptyline can be given, or SSRIs like sertraline that can also be given. But your mother's main problem, what I understood, was that there's difficulty in chewing and swallowing. So it will be very important to assess what aspect of it, whether it's a bulbar problem primarily, or is it a pseudobulbar? So that needs to be differentiated clinically by examining her. That is one aspect of it. The second thing also what you had said was regarding speech prosthetics. Now, see, there are certain things, we may not be able to get her to regain her speech, but there are voice banks, which at this stage may be a little difficult. But, just so that there is a sense of better communication, I think there is technology available where she can press buttons and those buttons would speak, because she can hear very well. So you can actually make sentences, common sentences that she would like to say, or you can even use cards for her to be able to communicate with you better. Her own voice we've not been able to preserve, but that's all right. What's important is that she should be able to communicate with us. So there are many technological advances which are not expensive, which can be used for her to be able to communicate in a audible way to us. So I hope that helps, Priyanka.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sir, in my father's case is also same, but
Yes.
can you tell me which type of technical instrument can be used?
Well, there are, these are simple things which I think from Google also we can use, or it's converting, there are text to voice converters.
And
So
also we have a Toby tracker, which is widely used in our group.
okay.
People are talking in using eyes. So you just form the words on the face of the screen. So I think who raised this point? Alka, Ekta, we can connect offline and I'll share with you. I think Prem sir is also here, and Juhi ma'am is using that eye tracker very finely and able to communicate with her son at US. So that's why so many people in group.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
So we are
one
using
more
through eyes
question.
communication.
Yeah. Only Nuedexta will work on this PSP?
No, there are other drugs also, but the one that's FDA approved is basically Nuedexta for progressive not PSP as such, but for pseudobulbar palsy, which can be
Okay.
seen in multiple sclerosis. It can be seen in other conditions, not just in ALS.
So my father is taking Dalitor, and a month before he was taking Adorvan also injection, but we find that his progression is there. So our doctor has stopped it, and now he's taking only Revolutor. So may I start this Nuedexta?
You see, again, you must understand that Nuedexta is not to prevent the progression of the disease.
Yeah, I can understand that. I know.
Yeah. So you can take Nuedexta. The only thing you should be very careful. It has a lot of drug interactions with other drugs. So before you start taking it, you need to check all the other medicines to make sure that there is no drug reaction.
Okay. So more, actually I'm nutritionist. So some question regarding that may I use some CoQ10 and vitamin B6, B2, B9 and B12. My father is taking Avion 600. And a part of that I want to start CoQ10 and melatonin.
Okay, so I don't think I'll be able to satisfactorily answer your question because there's a lot that is not known about nutritional deficiencies. If there is a deficiency, it should be corrected. Regarding melatonin is for sleep. Does he have a problem with sleep cycle?
Yeah, earlier he was taking sleeping medicines, but before 1 month, the doctor has stopped. So in that case, I think that is it work?
Yes, melatonin really helps in maintaining the sleep-wake cycle in a patient who needs it. I don't know your father's case, so it's difficult for me to recommend. Yeah.
Okay. And what about CoQ10 and glutathione?
I don't think there is enough evidence for me to recommend it again. Sadly, there are very few drugs that as a doctor I can recommend and prescribe to you in this disease.
No, sir, it's the glutathion is a type of coenzyme, antioxidant.
Yes, so, even as an antioxidant.
Yeah. I'm asking this question because I work with neuro AIMS department. There are some doctors giving this as a supplement. So I just introduced with ALS first time, which happened with my father. That's why I'm asking you. So
no, I totally understand your question. See, the struggle with treating patients who have ALS is there is not good evidence for us to say that it is beneficial or that it is not beneficial.
The whole world is in trial level.
Yes.
So there is no side effect of CoQ10 as I think. What and
I have not used it. I have not used it. Yeah.
We had side effects. So for our mama, we have not taken it.
No, which type of side effect you have got?
I know every person is different and every person reacts. And most of the Most of the patients in our group also are taking COQ10 pills.
Yeah. But what are the side effects the patient is suffering from? Like, because I don't know that.
The coenzyme Q10 is basically a drug that is used for mitochondrial disorders to
Yeah.
enhance the mitochondrial. It is one of the mitochondrial pathway enzymes. So we know that in ALS that there is, in certain types, mitochondrial dysfunction is there. Now
Yeah.
ALS is a very it's almost 6-7 pathways that get affected in ALS, and especially in sporadic ALS it is a mixture of things, and we don't know in each individual patient which one is the more dominant. But mitochondrial dysfunction definitely is one of the known mechanisms for ALS. So there may be no harm in taking it, but whether it will benefit, I cannot say.
No, that is not cleared. And what about, sir, that omega-3?
Yeah, I think there's some new interest in omega-3 that has just been
Omega-3,
generated.
yeah.
Yes, there is some interest, but again, I don't see any strong evidence for me to recommend it.
Yeah, I know that because I have read many journals and surveys. So I come about 14 nutrients are a little bit helpful, mainly vitamin E, L-threonine, omega-3, CoQ10, and glutathione. These are more, there are not that much study, but these are more helpful.
Yeah, but again, when we say helpful, what do we mean by helpful? Because most of the studies are done in rats, like in mice. And the sad part is when you translate, see, just to tell about how research happens in ALS. So what happens is they try to create mice that represent human ALS. And what they have been able to do is basically genetic ALS. So for many years, they had only the SOD1 type of mice. There's a particular type of genetic mutation called SOD1 mutation. So with the SOD1, so SOD1 mutation mice was the one that has been researched the most. But now there is recent evidence saying that sporadic ALS, which is 90% of ALS, is not very similar to SOD1, but is more similar to FUS and TRDP43 type of ALS. Which
Can you
is
repeat
not
FUS and
it's basically
TRDP?
It's, I think, fusion in sarcoma gene or something. It's like that. So the large body of evidence which was previously studied was on SOD1 mice. So that is one of the issues. Then they looked at C9orf72 also, which is a genetic type of a mutation, which is much more common in Europeans. In India, there's Dr. Gauri Devi's paper, which is saying it's less than 1 to 2% in the Indian population. So even those mice have been generated to study. So now the problem is that we are all talking about diseases which is sporadic. So there is no good mice model that has yet been created for sporadic ALS. And the problem with sporadic ALS is that it has got multiple different, it's not as streamlined like a genetic ALS, and there is epidemiological studies which have said that we need 6 hits. When I say, like, I don't know if you're aware, in for example, in cancer, just because you have a genetic thing that is saying that you may develop cancer doesn't mean you will get it. But you need at least so many hits, which may be environmental hits or some other hits.
Are different,
Yes. So like that, even in ALS now, they have found, based on epidemiological studies, you need 6 hits to happen for sporadic ALS to develop. And in patients who have C9orf72 mutation, which is detected, you need an additional of 3 hits. And in patients, we don't know. That is not clear what those hits are. And then in SOD1 type of mutation, you need an additional 2 hits. So again, it makes it a very, how do I put it? It's a wide spectrum for us to be able to study each individual thing like this. So when we say whether glutathione helps or doesn't help, I don't think there is a large body of evidence that has looked at it carefully enough for it to be recommended.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. This kind of explanation, I think was very helpful to understand the intricacies of that genetic factor, and also when you explained about the what's the difference between pseudo bulbar palsy, and that's really helpful to understand the things. Thank you so much, sir. So I think Ekta, we have moved. I think you can discuss.
Sure. Sorry to interrupt, but
no,
many questions are there.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to ask us questions from Swaroop. He's currently admitted in hospital, and he told me to ask the question on his behalf. So take care, Swaroop. We are there to support and wish for you. So he's a PALS himself, patients. So his question is: are there ways to increase muscle mass by injection or IV? As glutamine is help in clearing toxins from brain and body. I think 5, 6, 7, and 8 is from Swaroop.
Yeah. So I'll try to answer each of them. I have them here with me, the questions. So I think increasing muscle mass by taking injections or IV is probably, you're thinking of anabolic steroids or using other things, which, when people go to gym and they exercise and they try to exercise. See, the problem is not in the muscle. In ALS, we must understand that the problem is in the anterior horn cell. So even if we increase the muscle mass, the signal that is going to come from the spinal cord. And in the spinal cord is where your anterior horn cells are residing, which are millions of them, but they're all starting to waste away. And increasing the muscle mass will not really translate. I mean, that's my understanding of it. I can't say that it will not, but the muscles are not the problem. Targeting the muscles won't help the anterior horn cells from dying. So there are injections people give, but I don't think I would recommend it. It is not going to add, it won't help you to become more functional and to do the things you would like to do. So I don't think that will be helpful. Now, regarding glutathione, I think we just had a discussion that it is detoxifying drug that people do use because it has got the sulfur groups and then it binds and it causes detoxification. So I can't recommend it because I don't have any studies to say that it will be beneficial. But the mechanism of action definitely helps in detoxifying. Okay. So regarding multivitamins, is intravenous multivitamins helpful? Well, for a person who is deficient in multivitamins, they can definitely be benefited by giving IV multivitamins. So it is important that we test and see if the vitamin levels are reduced. Today, there are enough assays for us to be able to test it. Of course, these are serum assays. It is not tissue assay. So it is blood tests, so giving IV multivitamins, especially if they are water soluble, is not very harmful, because if it is high, usually most of these multivitamins will be washed away by the kidneys. So even if you kind of do take a little excess, it won't harm you. But hypervitaminosis, that is excess of vitamins, also has problems. So I think it should be taken with caution. And it's not like you can take as much and the more you take, the better it will be. I don't think that is true. And will amino acids like histamine 3 help? Well, amino acids in and of itself doesn't really help. Amino acids go into your system, and then in the liver, these amino acids are then converted into proteins, which are then used. So in a person who would be, again, malnourished, it would, and has a liver that is functioning normally, in those patients, probably amino acids may help. Like a patient who's not able to take enough orally, there may be a role, but again, that is to treat malnutrition, not to treat ALS. I hope these things are clear. And there's a question saying that do they work in long term, or do we need to get these supplements periodically?
So take it one session, like 1 month we are giving, stopping it, and periodically. I think that's the sense of the question one. Is that's the right way rather than taking all the time?
So the thing is that you know, certain forms of giving multivitamins, for example, vitamin D. Let's take vitamin D for example. Vitamin D has an activated form and it has an inactivated form. Activated vitamin D is in almost of our calcium tablets that you will buy from the market, which has got vitamin D in it, is the activated form of vitamin D, which basically doesn't store in your body. Every day you take it, it is washed away, the excess goes into the urine. Okay, so that you'll have to take daily. The sachets that you take, you know, the vitamin D sachets or the solutions, they actually get stored in your body. That's why you would take probably 8 of those over 8 weeks, and then you don't need to take again for another 6 months to a year. And then you also have depot preparations, which you can take as IM injections, which can be taken every year. So it is not really about the multivitamins. It depends on the form that you're taking in and how long it is going to stay in the body. So I hope that helps you answer. You can't take 1 month regularly, 1 month off. It depends on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. So I think we have Bharti, Vijaya Bharti. You may take and ask your question.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, my question is like, we all know that the motor neurons are disintegrating or degenerating in the case of MND. So I want to know whether the regeneration is slowly happening, or we are not generating the motor neurons again. So this is like the basic question.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I'll try to answer it as best as I can. See, there was this philosophy that existed for a long time that the anterior horn cell or any neurological cells don't regenerate. Okay, that was the standard therapy. But now we know that there are stem cells which are trying to regenerate. Having said that, you must understand anterior horn cells are very long cells. So in your spinal cord, the anterior part of the spinal cord has got this cell called the anterior horn cell. But the anterior horn cell is not just situated in the spinal cord. That anterior horn cell has got a long thread, which is called the axon, which comes out of the spinal cord into your spinal canal, out of the spinal canal through the nerves, and then it reaches your muscle. So when we say that the anterior horn cell is dying or disintegrating, it is an entire system that is dying. Okay, so it is not just the a cell in the spinal cord that is dying. It is that cell is a long cell. Okay, and of course the main problems that are there are in the head of the cell, which is in the spinal cord. So regeneration of these anterior horn cells is a very difficult thing to happen, because you can understand. I mean, let's take for example, in my spinal cord there will be an anterior horn cell. There are millions of them in one segment, and from there the axons, they come out of my neck, and then they, for example, in my thumb, they will travel all the way here into this muscle. So when I signal from my brain, it goes into that anterior horn cell on this side, and then I'm able to move my muscle. Okay, so when the anterior horn cell within the spinal cord degenerates, regenerating it is a very difficult. You can probably prevent the degeneration of these cells, which is why people are really struggling to identify patients early on, before these cells have degenerated beyond a certain limit, so that we can prevent them from dying and then hopefully regain some function. I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Okay.
So is there any?
Yes, yes, yes. Very
we
much.
go
You
from here?
explained it very well. Thank you so much, sir. So, Prashant, you are here? Yes. Prashant, can you ask your question yourself?
Hello, are you listening?
Hi, Prashant.
Hello.
Hi, Prashant. I can hear you.
Hi. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
So my question is, sir, my brother 29 years old. He is suffering from ALS for last 3 years, and presently he is on bed. So my question is there any credible research going on in any part of the world where there is talk of ALS reversal,
Okay.
not progression? Because if patient is on bed, so then after progression is slowing down is not an issue at all. Because if he's on bed, it hardly matters if progression slows or
Yes.
fast is. It matters
Yes.
is reversal. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
I totally understand your question, and I'm very sorry to hear this. I think the way I would approach it is just two things. First, I would,
Yes.
they look like ALS, but it is not actually ALS, which are potentially treatable. And it's important that we should rule them out. I'm sure your doctor has done whatever needs to be done to rule out those diseases, because it's very difficult sometimes to differentiate them. I don't know your patient's condition, so I wouldn't say more than this, but I think we need to be very clear that the patient has ALS. That is one aspect, because there are diseases which are reversible even with today's knowledge. Having said that, your question was whether there are reversal agents. So there is a lot of research that is happening in the world today, and I think Sadhvinder and I were just discussing. She made me aware of, recently there's a lot of interest in it, and I reviewed it after my conversation with her. And again, this is a study which is done in mice. Okay, so what they have done is they've taken out the mice's brain upper motor neurons, like the neurons which are here, because this also gets damaged in ALS. And they have looked at these neurons and put them on a petri dish, and they have been throwing chemicals at these neurons to see what they like, which means, you put a chemical A and then you see that the neurons are all shrinking, shriveling, not synapsing. You know that these neurons don't like that chemical, or that chemical is harmful. Like that, now they have put certain chemicals, and they have found certain chemicals make them very happy. So they are putting out many more synapses. And they are saying that the mice's brain cell is very similar to the human brain cell. But again, many of these researches, when they put it into human beings for clinical trials, they fail. They fail for the very reason, like what I explained in detail, why there is so much of a difference in what happens in mice or preclinical research and actually what is there in human beings, because a human being disease is very different. So right now, in preclinical stages, there are several exciting molecules. One I said was NU9, which has to be, then taken out from that level and be studied in human beings before we can recommend it. Then there are studies. There was this, again, you shared it, ropinirole. Ropinirole is a dopamine agonist drug which we use for patients with Parkinson's disease. So there is a lot of interest even in this. Again, similar study that they did, all preclinical studies. So as of now, there is no medicine which can reverse it, but that is today's knowledge, what I am aware of. But at the same time, my first thing to be, to help you, or if I would want to look at your case carefully, would be to confirm the diagnosis of ALS, because there is a disease which looks very similar to it, but is potentially treatable. So that would be where I would begin.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing that aspects of the research and the inside of it, what it means by NU9 and what's the implication. So, and what we are looking ahead on finding these stuff. in time to come. So if we have a team of, I think, group of doctors or scientists from India also, with your mindset and the detailed vast knowledge you have, so I'm sure something would turn up for sure in positive direction.
We're all very hopeful. We're all
Yeah.
very hopeful. I think Prashant has raised his hand. Maybe he has another question.
Yeah, Prashant, please go ahead.
Yeah. Actually, at our answer, we tried our best to rule out any other possibilities. We contacted Dr. Godinam also, to at AIMS Delhi, and other neurologists. All
Okay.
confirmed the same.
All right.
So, sir, from my end, whatever resources I yes, sir. So, sir, if still there any possibility, I will explore the
Definitely. Definitely. I think that's, it's everybody's story. Everybody here has the same struggle. So I think as soon as something comes up, I'm sure, this whole group will be aware of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Prashant. Thank you, sir.
So, any test you would like to see?
So Prashant, your voice is breaking.
Any test you would?
What I can do is, I have this chapter which is, I'll share it with Satwinder. You can probably, share it with him. So it has a list of diseases that we look at, so you can go through all those things and see if all of them have been looked at. Okay. So I'll share the document.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir. So Harsh, you are there? Harsh Kashyap?
Yes.
Yeah, Harsh, you may ask your.
Good evening, doctor.
Hi, Harsh.
My mother recently on 5th May, she had a excess saliva. She was having excess saliva. So by this she cannot eat or drink. As soon as she eat or drink, more excess saliva came out. So so after that, in that case, her SpO2 her breathing issue has started. I have shared a video also. If you like to, if you have seen, I've shared a video link of that day of breathing. And after that, we had a test, some test. In that, the TLC was high, 12 point something. Then we had some antibiotics. After that, TLC was also high, so some antibiotics also gone. So after the last antibiotic course, the TLC was 10 point something, 6-7. But still she was having a kind of similar kind of breathing issue. I've shared the video of current present also if you want to see.
Okay.
We had also heard, we have also test from her cardio aspects, troponin T, echo. Troponin T was negative, echo was fine, but in ECG it was something was detected. But on other things are fine. But we are not figuring out why it is all sudden, and after that she was having breathing issue, and also excess saliva is whole day. And third, there is a pain in chest. Both sides there is a pain in chest. And last time we did a X-ray, it was fine. Doctor said it was fine.
So, so what I have understood is basically that there is a lot of excessive saliva, which happens suddenly. There was no excessive saliva before May 5th. Is that correct?
No. There was, but not that much.
Not that much. Okay.
So before May 5th, she was eating also. Not normally, but she was eating. She can speak also. But after that, and we had also had rise to 6th May. After that, the saliva and the speech has terribly affected, and the breathing issue has started that.
So I think, of course, it's difficult for me to make a clear comment on this, but, excessive saliva is a common problem because what happens is the tongue becomes weak, and saliva normally anyway is being produced for all of us. Saliva is being produced, but that saliva is also being cleared. Okay, we are swallowing the saliva and we are putting it from there into our esophagus and it's going down into our stomach. But what happens is, as the disease progresses, there comes a point when we are not able to swallow our saliva at all. And also because of weakness of the tongue, it may even roll down our cheeks. Okay. So that causes, the problem is not the excess of saliva. The problem is that you're not able to clear it from the normal way. So in that situation, there is treatment that we can give to reduce the amount of saliva that is being produced. So there are tablets which can be given. We can even give injections into the salivary glands, or you can also take very low dose of radiation into the salivary glands. So these are things that I can suggest. It's best that your doctor who's there looks at it and suggests it to you.
Doctor said to have glycopyrrolate tablets. We are using it, but it is
Effective?
not. My mother don't like that.
So the other thing that you
Actually.
can look at is, one thing is low dose radiation. You know, like you give radiation in cancer, but you don't give that level of radiation in this. You give much low dose radiations to your salivary glands. So then they will start producing less amount of saliva. So she doesn't have to take any tablets, which, you know, glycopyrrolate makes you feel funny, you know, you feel hot and other things also there. So
there is a one more drop cream that is known as atropine. Atropine.
Yes. So
that many
yes.
are using also. But the thing is, main focus is, why is this breathing distress? Why is breathing is distressed?
So I would look at it in two ways. One thing is whether the saliva, as it is going down, I hope you understand that, you know, the mouth, behind the mouth, it's one chamber. It's called the oropharynx. Okay.
Yes.
Below that chamber, it divides into two pipes. Okay. So your lung pipe is in front and your food pipe is behind it. And there is a very complex mechanism of controlling saliva and food going into the food pipe and air going into the lung pipe.
Okay.
It's a very fine, delicate balance. And when our muscles are becoming weak over time, that balance gets affected. And then you may have breathing difficulty because the saliva, instead of going into the food pipe, is now trickling into the breathing pipe. And then you have a lot of breathing difficulty that can develop at that time, which is when we will have to plan a tracheostomy. So that what happens is, this is how the pipes are. So you put in a tube from in front of the throat into this pipe, okay, and then you inflate a balloon inside it, so that her breathing pipe is now separate. And the saliva might still drool, but it will not be as much, it won't go into the lungs. Okay. So that is, you know, it's difficult for me to say it without seeing the patient, but you know, this is something that I'm thinking of could be the problem.
So is this something which is followed for saliva reduction, this radiation therapy which you are sharing?
Yes.
That's been followed.
Yeah, I can share. I will share the document with you. It's
I
all.
have a document. I was
It's all
thinking
written in that.
Okay, I was thinking this is under trial. I have also received a research document from my onco. She was a radiation oncologist. So she shared with me because she was aware of our group. But I was thinking this was a trial. But you are saying that's something which is in practice also.
Yes, I mean, see, it's a palliative thing that we are doing. You know, when I say palliation, we are not going to reverse the ALS, but we're making ALS more manageable. So it's basically whatever ways, there are so many ways that you can decrease the function of these glands. You know, there's botulinum toxin, there are so many other things that can be done. But these are the simpler things that I said. Whenever you think of radiation, we are worried, you know, it should not harm the tissue and all. But these are things that definitely can be offered if they're not tolerating glycopyrrolate. Like atropine was the basic thing. Glycopyrrolate is a more advanced form of the same atropine. But if she's not tolerating that, then we can look at other ways which are comfortable for her.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would suggest, Harsh, you can connect with Sir one-to-one and discuss in detail, if possible. Harsh? You're there, Harsh? Okay.
Hello.
So maybe I have skipped. I think Renu.
Hello.
Miss Renu is also there. Miss Renu. Renu Di, you want to ask your question? Is there any test of? Yes, there was some studies which says that gut is the main cause of ALS. So, is there any test to check out that gut functioning?
Well, I'm not very much aware of gut being linked to ALS. There's definitely now studies linking gut to Parkinsonism, especially alpha-synuclein based diseases. But these are also very early stages of research.
Okay.
It's very hard to say it now. Of course, in India, with our traditional medicine, with Ayurveda, gut has been a major part of focus. So we will be very quick to adopt these things. But I don't think there is very strong evidence yet on this. And I would like to just leave it at that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Ekta has already asked. I think I'm missing anyone. Okay.
Pragya.
Pragya, please.
I want to ask my question
Hi.
is different in that, like Alka is also asking same. We have ordered Turka, but our doctor has suggested Turka 3 gram and 1 gram of sodium phenylbutyrate. But we are not finding in India, even not able to order from USA. So this Turka only will work or not?
Well, I did review. I saw your question and I was reviewing it. See, sodium phenylbutyrate is available in India in various forms. It is basically, I think it was a histone, or I forgot. I just read it just now.
Okay.
I think it will be available. Sodium.
Sir, wherever I am calling to pharmaceutical companies and that chemical companies, they are informing me that they have a raw material, and they told me that we have to connect with the Cipla or Sun Pharma or Lupin, etc. companies. It is not available in tablet form. Do you have any reference?
No, I won't have any reference, but this is something that we can look at. But again, I'm sure you understand that, the study that has been done is a phase 2 study. It has shown promise.
Yeah, that's true. But many people are taking Turka, but without combination of both, it will work or not?
I'm not sure. There was a study which was done, I think, it's published in ALS.
MILS company.
Yeah, no, there was a study. NEJM published it last year, but there was another study which was looking at only sodium phenylbutyrate in isolation.
Okay.
So this is with Toro DL, the chemical, So, and the study which has come out positive is the one which has used both. But I wouldn't know whether phenylbutyrate alone would be beneficial. Maybe we can look at that study again, the one that was done, and what level of confidence it is giving us.
I'm asking about Turka is alone. I have Turka is alone. I'm not able to find the particular in medicinal form that phenylbutyrate. Companies, chemical companies and pharmaceutical companies are ready to give raw material of phenylbutyrate. That's why I'm not able to take it. We cannot give raw material.
Yeah, but I don't know. When I'm going online, I'm finding many options. Maybe you'll have to look at them individually and ask them if it is available. If you Google it in India, some of these things are available. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But sir, excuse me.
Okay.
Hello.
Vibha?
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. Alka.
Alka. Okay. I can see Vibhaji, Neenaji, and Madhvi also has raised the hand, and we are left with. I think we were planning for 1 hour.
I have also my questions.
Okay, Pragya.
Actually,
okay, I know, but I think 1 hour is already consumed, which I have taken that time from sir.
Actually, I have not asked any question.
I'm happy to answer if there's something within my domain.
Okay.
It was very good that you sent me these questions. So
like, sir,
I had some time to I had some time to review it before meeting everybody, because I'm sure this is something everybody is looking forward to. So I'm happy to take more questions.
Okay, thank you,
And
sir.
please
I'll
forgive
come.
me if
You
I can't
may
give all
ask.
the answers. Yeah.
Okay, sir, I wanted to ask, like, my husband is taking physiotherapy daily. So is it advisable, like, to take it, to do it daily?
Again, there is no evidence to say what is good and what is bad, but in sense of physiotherapy, definitely I would encourage him to take physiotherapy, because ALS is a wasting disease, and it is very important for him to keep his limbs mobile. So what happens over a period of time is, when you become inactive for whatever reason, you develop a lot of pain, and that it can be a very painful thing at that point in time. So what happens is, if you're not moving your limbs, the joints, you need to be make sure the joints are moving. Otherwise, towards the end, what happens is, when we are giving sides or moving minimal movement, they have excruciating pain. So comfort is important, but I would recommend that.
Yeah. And okay, and sir, coming back to this टुटका, I wanted to know, like, एकता मैम ने तो पूछा ही कि अगर हम वो single component, if you are taking it, so is it beneficial? Like, everybody's like, most of them are talking in our group, ALS group, about this टुटका, and they're taking it. And in US, like, it is available, but getting, and in Surat, neurologists don't suggest it also. So what is your take? Like, should we, like, take or not?
I think it's a very exciting molecule, especially that has reached phase 2, and it has shown slowing of the disease again. It has not shown reversal. It has shown slowing. Basically, the ALS FRSR, when they're following up patients. So those who took it versus those who didn't take it, the slowing rate was a little bit slower. It's clinically significant, but it was a little bit slower, not a dramatic change. It's not a life-saving drug. But in this condition, if we get something that is showing some benefit, we would like to take it. So having said that, FDA will not give approval till a phase 3 trial is done. I think they have applied for expedited approval. They might even get it. Then it will be.
But sir, it is available, like, off the counter in US.
Yeah, because
so how come,
because
like,
it is, see, what happens is, when you look at FDA to approve it, you have to show efficacy. To show efficacy, it has to be shown in a variety of patient populations. It cannot be shown in a few subset patients. And although I do feel it has reached this far, it may be beneficial, but until that studies are done, as a doctor, it's very hard for me to prescribe it. But having said that, patient doesn't have time. The patient is worsening in front of us. So are we going to wait for science to catch up, or are we going to give it? So the important thing will be, what is the harm? So that is what I'm not aware of. I think we need to look at it and look at, I think most of the side effects were more gastrointestinal side effects. But that is something we'll have to see. If the harm is not very significant, then I don't see why we can't give it. But I would very cautiously put it out there if it is available.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. So Neena ji and Vibha ji,
Can I ask one question?
Sure, please.
Hello, Dr. Jason.
Hello.
I have a question. I just wanted to know whether we should go for the test of heavy metals in blood again. Like, when at the initial stages we got it done, but it was not there. Do you think it would be beneficial for the patient to again see it in blood? Or is it done in the hair in India? Any lab is doing that?
Okay. So that's a very good point. I think we must understand how these tests work. So heavy metals is something that people have been looking at to cause ALS. But the tests that we do are serum based. They are blood level based tests, the usual which labs will do. And they are not very helpful after a certain period of time. So only in acute toxicity will they come positive. So it's like somebody took a lot of these heavy metals. You send the blood test within the first few days, 2 days to maybe a month maybe. Then they may come positive. But after 6 months to 1 year testing it is not of any benefit. Now coming to the tissue sample, for example, hair, nails, which are slow growing parts of keratin, where these molecules can be, they accumulate and you can study it. So we recently tried to approach central government labs, which we were able to access, but they have also stopped doing it. Probably maybe it's because of COVID, in between they start doing it and then they stop it. So I'm not aware where they are doing it right now, especially some of the agricultural institutes are better, but they are not, for these heavy metal toxics, but they are not usually titrated to human levels. So that is the challenge in testing them.
But would it be helpful to the patient? Suppose it comes out positive. Now, at an established stage of disease, where the patient is unable to speak, move, swallow, totally depends.
Well, see, usually heavy metal poisoning, you must understand, doesn't happen just like that. Unless the water has, so we can always test the water, we can test the food to see why would this individual suddenly have so much of heavy metals. So the question, if he's having heavy metals, is to see what is happening. Why is he continuing to have so much of heavy metals in his blood or this thing? So he's ingesting it, he is getting it from somewhere. So that will raise a lot of questions. But having said that, if heavy metals are there, then he needs to be treated for these heavy metals. And there is a chance that at least it will slow down the progression of the disease, if not halt it.
Okay. One more question I wanted to know is, what is your differential diagnosis? You said there is a list of diseases which might mimic this.
Ninaji, he would be sharing the
Because
document
that list,
with me. He would be sharing a document with me, and I'll share with the group so that we can.
Yeah, with the group.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that we also study and see if maybe we are missing something.
No problem.
Like
Actually, it is pre-publishing, so I'm not sure if I can share it very freely. Let me see what I can do. I'll anyway send you the references from where I wrote it, so you can look at this. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Satwinder, one more question I wanted to ask. Sorry.
Alka ji,
should we continue taking Rilutar?
Yes, you must. So there is evidence that Rilutor is beneficial at all stages of ALS. Okay, so definitely even till as long as we can give. Syrup Rilutor, I don't know if it is available, but that is another form that we can give later on, when we can through the NG. But there is evidence that says that Riluzole is beneficial at all stages of ALS.
So twice a day?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Pragya or Vibha ji, if you want to ask question.
May I पूछ लूं?
Pragya ji.
Dr. Vinny, thank you so much. This has been like, I had only one question, but after hearing these conversations, I've asked some additional questions there. So, you talked about that you can easily identify the level of degeneration that's happening. So my pals or my mother-in-law, she's the patient. We got to know about this just 3 months ago. She has bulbar onset with speech difficulty. We can still understand a little bit of what she says, and swallowing difficulty is what she has. She's 78. So what we wanted to understand is, how can we identify the level of degeneration? Is there any test that we should do, and how often? And maybe connected with this is, what the question that I had put in was, how can you measure the level of progression that's happening? And how would I do that so that, I'm more prepared as to what's going to come for me?
Okay.
At any stage.
So I don't know where you got this part that I have told that you can look at the progression, but let me answer it to the best of my ability. One thing is, we know that elderly patients with ALS, especially if they are women, usually present with bulbar disease. Okay, so why that happens, we don't know. But when we look at large number of patients, that's the pattern that we get to see. Second thing is, bulbar onset, sadly, itself is a poor prognostic indicator. Now, why is it a poor prognostic indicator? It is because bulbar onset leads to respiratory difficulty. Okay, sooner than had it been a limb onset ALS. So because of that, they say that it is a poorer prognosis. Prognosis is basically to say the survival after onset. Yeah. But now there is a lot of treatments that can be done, and it all depends on to what extent we would like to go ahead with it. Like I suggested tracheostomy, that is one possibility, which I also said why in the evidence or the larger countries, they would dissuade you from going in that direction. But it is definitely a viable option, especially if she is cognitively intact and she's otherwise all four limbs are fine. So that is one aspect of bulbar onset. Having said that, there are measures, okay? There are electrophysiological measures by which you can look at the motor neuron density or how much is still viable. So there are two things. You can study the cortical cells and you can study the spinal cord cells. So the measures that people have looked at is a thing called MUNIX or MUNE, motor unit number estimation. These are electrophysiological parameters that are done. And the other one for the brain, they are looking at hyperexcitability using transcranial magnetic stimulation. Okay, so they look at transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is done. I don't think it's done in India, sadly. In Australia and in the US, they are using it to follow up patients to see this. Also, one third thing I would leave with you is that ALS progression is not a linear progression. There are different patients. Some patients progress very rapidly. Some patients progress slowly. And some patients actually maintain it for quite some time and then they deteriorate. So it's very hard. They're trying to look at markers to know which patients will be in what type of a progression. I don't think we are there yet, which is why it is so important for all of us to participate in research and contribute information, even though it is not there today, but definitely our efforts will take the world a lot closer to be able to answer all of these questions, in the next probably just a few years. That's very important. So these are, yeah.
So these tests about the cortical cells and the spinal cord cell test that you said, I could discuss this with my doctor. We had actually gotten an EMG test done for her before, the doctor had confirmed, and also an MRI and CT scan for her. How often do you think, one can get these tests done? Every 6 months or, because obviously, as you said, one cannot see what the progression speed is like.
Yes. No, I think this is basically beneficial in a research setting, not so much in a clinical setting. But as we want to increase the knowledge about this disease, so we can volunteer for, for it to be studied on us, so that there is a, at least 100, 200, 300 patients. So we can at least see in India what is happening to our patients. And then accordingly, we'll be in a better position to maybe 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, the same questions you are saying, we will have something to be able to tell them. This is what needs to be done. But I don't think clinically it will add much value, but definitely in terms of research. And it is usually, the same EMG test that they do, that they did, which would have been a little painful, I'm sure, because they put needles in the patient. So they use that.
Thankfully, it wasn't that painful. I mean, she was okay throughout the test.
Yeah.
So I think maybe the doctor was good, or he was just very nice with her.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it wasn't too painful.
So it's the same instrument that is used. Yeah.
So just two quick more questions is, I just wanted your confirmation. You said, there's a difference between a bulbar and a pseudobulbar.
Yeah.
And you'd also said that the pseudobulbar is related to mood swings. And she had been taking anxiety medicines for quite some time, which is clothianidin. So I just wanted to ask you, is this pseudobulbar or bulbar? Because the EMG says compatible with Awagi-Shima criteria of multi-segmental anterior horn cell disease.
Yes.
Is this bulbar or pseudobulbar?
So what happens is that you have both. Now, ALS as such has to have, for the criteria of ALS to be fulfilled, you need to have both lower motor neuron and upper motor neuron to be present. The electrophysiology that is there with us today can test only lower motor neuron.
Okay.
Okay, it is not able to test upper motor neuron. Upper motor neuron we test clinically. So if the patient has got brisk reflexes, you know, they'll put that hammer and tap the knees and the elbows, and they look at the, you know, the toe, and then they'll strike it against the toe key or something, and to see if the big toe goes up. That's called the Babinski sign. So these are evidences of upper motor neuron involvement. But electrophysiologically, we can only trace lower motor neuron. Having said that, if that's in India, I'm saying, and then MRI also can give you some clues. There are certain signs in the MRI, in the spine and in the brain, which can suggest that this may be a ALS patient. In that, it's an upper motor neuron that you're studying with the MRI. But there are other ways also, like I said, with transcranial magnetic stimulation, you can also study, but not much of TMS work in ALS I am aware of. I'm sure if there is happening, I'm not aware of it, to look at upper motor neuron electrophysiologically. Yeah.
Just one last, and then I leave it to the others. Is, you know, you talked about pneumonia as an issue with people with bulbar onset, is what you just said right now.
Yes.
I had actually asked this question in the group also, and if I have to check for aspiration pneumonia, because the doctor did advise that, you know, in the long run you should take a peg. Unfortunately, we don't want to do that with her right now, because even though she's taking time to eat, more often than not, she is being able to eat on her own. And we want to continue that way, because we know that the moment we give her a peg, you know, half the battle is going to be lost, emotionally and psychologically for her. So
well,
how can I test for pneumonia very often? Because today I can't go for a, you know, with the COVID situation, I can't go for a.
No, I respect your decision whether you want to go ahead with the peg or not. And there's no right or wrong in this. It's every individual family and person's decision. But I want to say one thing. There was a question also that, you know, peg is basically to help maintain your body weight. So what happens is they take a lot of time to eat. And not only that, micro aspirations do happen even before you come to know about it. And PEG does not actually prevent aspiration. I think that's a bit of a misconception that PEG will prevent aspiration, because you're still swallowing saliva. You know, so by the time you will even aspirate your saliva. But PEG will help you to maintain the body weight, which is very important for her well-being, for her mood. If she's going to lose weight, you know, and she's going to literally become very thin very fast, it happens in a few months. At that time, to try to go in and do a PEG can be challenging. You know, for example, when you do a PEG, you know, you have to put an endoscope through the mouth and into the stomach, and then you put in the thing. So if she's having respiratory difficulty, doing a PEG will become very risky for her.
Understood.
So, you know, if you're planning to get in for a PEG, I would say the sooner the better. And let her, and she can take orally. Nobody's stopping her from eating orally. Let her take, you supplement with PEG, whatever she does not want to take orally, you can supplement. So body weight is maintained.
So if the body weight is maintained till that time, I'm okay. The moment I start seeing a drop, I should go for this.
Yeah, there are clear indicators as to when you should put in a PEG. Again, that's in my chapter. When I share the document, you can go through.
We'll do that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Pragya ji. Thank you so much. And thank you, sir. Madhvi and Vibha ji, the last, I think we can take.
Yeah, my battery is about to get over. Let me just get the battery.
Yeah. Thank you for the insights. Actually, Pragya ji already asked one of the questions that I had, so I have the answer for that. But as of now, my Bua, she's in Jalandhar and I'm here in Melbourne. I really can't go back to her. So just trying to gain all the information that I can. So currently she is able to walk with somebody's support, and as she's having swallowing issues as well right now. So hers was a bulbar onset. So I just want to know, like, what are the best food supplements that we can give to her so to maintain her body weight? Like most other patients, she's pretty against getting a PEG done. I am trying to convince her that she should go for it, But just with regards to health supplements, what are the best, the brands or however, whichever we can give her?
Yeah, I think that's not a question I'll be able to answer satisfactorily. Supplement wise, I wouldn't recommend one over the other. Any supplement is helpful, I guess. It all depends at what stage she is. The best is food, better than any supplement. Balanced diet, good quality food, fresh fruits. If she's able to take it, it can even be, the main thing is changing the consistency of the food items of the diet. If you change the consistency and make it more pureed and thickened rather than watery, they are still able to take it. So that would be probably the first thing. Apart from that, any supplement, in my opinion, is as good as the other. There is no specific brand that I would recommend you take this one, this is better than the other. I think that's what I would say.
Thank you so much.
I think we can take a last question from Vibhaji.
Just give me a second. I'll just put it on chat.
Sure.
आज में लगाने में
Yeah.
So Vibhaji, you can ask your question.
Yeah, good evening, doctor. My husband is the patient, his Bals. He's a surgeon by profession, and unfortunately, he got it 2.5 years back. So I just wanted to ask, I have got the heavy metal test done for him, and his arsenic level is marginally high. So should I go for a chelation therapy or something?
Well, how high is it?
Marginally high. It's 5.12. It should be less than 5, and it's 5.12.
I really doubt that.
Beryllium also.
Yeah.
Little above the normal.
So he's a surgeon, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. See,
I'm a gynecologist.
Okay. I really doubt that the arsenic is the cause for his ALS. Because arsenic, the known ways that it usually manifests is with small fiber neuropathy, very painful small fiber neuropathy. So arsenic per se causing ALS is, lead, other chemicals, other heavy metals are more known to cause it. But arsenic, you can undergo chelation therapy. I think, with PDTA and BAL, those are things that are possible. But I would probably send a repeat test to be sure. Sometimes these labs, the way they test it is not very reliable. And the serum testing, this would have been serum levels, right?
Yeah,
blood serum levels. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would really question the test first and send a repeat test.
So as regards salivation, everybody is telling there's drooling of saliva, and people are not being able to swallow the saliva. It's the other way in our case. My husband is most of the time, every time, not most of the time, all the time he's dry mouth. He's got fasciculations on the tongue also, but he opens his mouth while sleeping and he takes his breath with the open mouth. He inhales through the nose, but exhales through the mouth. That makes his tongue very dry all the time. So I was thinking of mimics of ALS. So we got it diagnosed from Dr. A. Nalini ma'am from NIMHAT.
Yes.
Actually, nobody was bold enough. I'm here based in Patna, Bihar, and nobody was bold enough to say this to a doctor patient. You know how things are. I don't want to utter it in in words, although I got the hint, but we got it through Dr. Nalini ma'am, who also went for the mimics of ALS. And she only confirmed that no, it's ALS. But his symptoms started to the index finger and thumb in the right hand, and at 6 monthly intervals, he got the other limb affected as well. Like first right and then left upper limb, and then right and left lower limb got affected. Now he's bedridden, but we make him sit on the wheelchair to, for an hour or so, and then again he lies down on that. So how is it that he does not salivate like others do? He's having difficulty in swallowing. We are giving him semi-solid food crushed in mixer and all, and he's taking it through mouth only. We don't have he doesn't have a peg done, neither his tech. So why is that he's not salivating and others are? Almost everybody is at his stage of the disease, and he has got such dry mouth all the time. He sips water.
What about his, this dry mouth may be an issue because of some other comorbid disease? Does he have diabetes?
No, he doesn't have diabetes. He only has a hypertension, which is controlled with telmisartan in the morning and Cilacar in the afternoon.
And any other drugs that he is taking which can cause
at
dryness?
times he takes Diator because the whole body is shrunken sort of, and the feet are swollen like anything. I think it will tear out some time like that. Only the feet part till the ankle, nothing about it.
Yeah, I would really want to evaluate him further, because in ALS usually you don't get pedal edema like this. So I'm not sure why he has the pedal edema, but I think you need to evaluate that, and that may give you the clue for his dry mouth. You know that Diator is anyway diuretic, so he may be dehydrated because of that. But generally, before he had ALS, was he still having dry mouth?
No.
It is only after ALS that you feel that it's become more dry.
And the pedal edema also set in after he was diagnosed ALS in 2019 Feb. I mean, it's almost 2.5 years now.
Yeah, I would want to really look at why he has pedal edema. So the combination of these symptoms are very odd for ALS.
Yeah, that is what bothers me all the time, whether he's having ALS or not. But the muscle wasting, and he's lost 22 kgs of weight in these 2.5 years.
Yeah, so again, that weight loss is also concerning to me, as to, that is something that will make him very weak. And his, so that is where a peg would help him to gain and maintain weight. Gain weight may not be possible, but at least to maintain weight and the muscle mass, because swallowing is difficult. So it takes a long time for him to finish his meals.
Yeah.
So
and that too, the quantity has come down to almost 1/3. He used to eat 3 chapatis, now he's eating only 1. And that too, when we mix it in milk or soup or any type of liquid, even dal, we mix it in dal and then
and then when he lies down, I think we can probably discuss this further, but when he lies down, does he need pillows to lie down, or he can lie down flat?
Yeah, we raise the head end of the bed.
So I think there is some respiratory and phrenic nerve involvement that probably seems to be coming in, and he may be having difficulty in breathing, which is keeping his mouth dry. So I mean, that is probably what we'll need to see, and if he's lying down, he's having difficulty, then his carbon dioxide retention should be something we look at. If you have a capnometer, or if you can see early morning CO2, and whether you need an early BiPAP. That is something we
actually
have to
his oxygen level is okay. Measure it with the pulse oximeter.
Carbon dioxide is
but the ABG, I need to get it done.
Yeah.
And a BiPAP will help.
Yes.
So we should go for a BiPAP and PET.
No, don't. It's not my recommendation like this. I think your primary care doctor who is taking care of you needs to look at all of these things. The pedal edema is something I'm concerned about. He's on Diator, he's on hydrochlorothiazide, he's not on amlodipine, so he's only on telmisartan. So why the pedal edema in him? There's some doubt about the dryness of the mouth. That is also something we have to look at, why that is happening. And
who is the best person to consult? A neurologist? Here we don't have of that caliber.
I think you will have
You
to.
can contact, you can contact sir. I think
On video.
he has given a good,
I think
I would say, a chance that you may have something else also associated with this. So I'm sure I do feel that you should discuss with sir one-to-one.
Okay, I will. I will.
I think
I'll take his
Vibhaji
valuable time
herself is a
sometime.
Vibhaji herself is a gynecologist, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
Vibhaji?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
But
Okay.
things have turned out to be so haphazard nowadays that
yeah, I know because of COVID it's difficult, but
Yeah.
you can
no,
see
carrying him from one place to another is also
Yes.
very difficult.
Yes.
No, we can have an online session. You
Yeah.
can have an online session,
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
I'll take his time someday. I'll talk to him and take his time if he's kind enough to give me some time. So
Yeah, sure,
consult
sure.
the neurologist.
Yeah.
I think
Okay, sir. Thank you so much for your valuable advice.
Okay.
My husband had been waiting for this session, and
Hello, sir.
he's also very much surprised and happy about this session. He
Yes.
cannot say, actually, he cannot speak now. So, but he's thankful. I can
Yes,
see from his face that he's thankful.
Yes.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes,
You're welcome.
hello. So, thank you so much, sir. We are really grateful for your time and the way you have explained the things and solved the queries. I have never met, I think, this kind of doctor who has explained it so well. So I'm feeling that in our journey also we could have met. I think we would have been lucky. But I'm sure the group is going to
just
be
one last
very
question.
benefit. Yes, who is this? Harsh. Okay.
Doctor, my mother is also a RLS patient. She is using Ropark 1
Yes.
mg. Is it do it have a side effect? Means it can affect anything wrong?
Well, Ropark is a drug that I said people are very interested in, which can actually, again, this is in mice models, which the motor neurons like. So, I don't think so much of side effect wise. I think, if you're taking it, you continue to take it.
I am taking twice. We are taking twice, morning and night.
Okay. My understanding was Ropark is once a day. Let me just check it. Anyway, you can review the medications.
And second thing, doctor, so we can use BiPAP for that breathing issue.
So BiPAP, you must understand, BiPAP should not be given when there is weakness of the bulbar muscles. Okay. Why that is so is because BiPAP is going to put pressure forcefully from the mouth into that single tube, and it's going to push whatever is there into the lung and into the stomach. So if your control over this is not good, it will push all the saliva also into the lung. So it is beneficial to use BiPAP when you don't have significant bulbar weakness, but you're having respiratory problems, which can be because of the phrenic nerve or the diaphragm getting affected. Okay, so in those patients, BiPAP is very beneficial and
Actually,
better to start it earlier.
Happens suddenly. It happens suddenly. This type of salivation happens suddenly. I cannot understand how it can be happen suddenly. It should be if it is a muscle progression of bulbar, it should be progressive.
Yeah, no, I think again, we need to look at these things very carefully before recommending anything to anyone. But I hope you understand the principle on whom you should give BiPAP, whom you shouldn't.
Yes,
because you can cause harm also. Same thing in certain patients may be harmful. Yeah.
I think Harsh, we are already, I think, over 1.5 hours.
Yeah, sure.
So I think we can continue the discussion. I'm sure the group members, the way you have explained the things, they are going to call you independent one-to-one and keep you busy. So thank you so much for a valuable time, sir.
Yeah. Just before I close, just one thing I would like to ask all of you, since you're here. I think there's a lot of research that needs to happen in ALS, and research does not mean only participating in clinical trials, although that is also very important. I think the community here, it will be good if we understand how research is done, so that we can participate in these things meaningfully. Even, there's so much of knowledge, even as I was reading your questions, there is so much of learning that takes place. Each patient is different, and the struggles that even the family goes through is very unique. And it is very important that we understand this so that we can recommend that it will benefit so many people. So maybe in time, I will be in touch with Satvinder, and we might send out a Google form or something so that we are able to understand who diagnosed your ALS, how long did it take for it to be diagnosed in India, and your struggles after that, and how did things progress for you, and even how you're looking for information, your level of education, because I understand most of the people here are well educated. You're using Zoom. But many people in India are uneducated, illiterate. They also suffer with ALS, and there's a large majority of them. So whatever we can glean from our learnings will help them a lot. So I will be in touch with Satvinder. I'm sure she'll reach out to you, and we can look at how we can further the understanding of ALS in India
Yes.
better.
We are really looking forward, and our group is going to give you all support which we could give and move this journey forward in a positive direction from India. And I'm sure this is going to go somewhere, which I think with the kind of knowledge you have and kind of need people are having in this group. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for being here.